I've been driving for UPS for about 8 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything. Small towns, weird customers, strange deliveries, you name it. But what happened to me last Tuesday in this little town outside Charlotte still has me checking my rearview mirror every 5 minutes. I was doing my usual route, nothing out of the ordinary, when I got to this package that had been sitting in my truck for 3 days. Heavy as hell, probably 60 pounds, and it needed a signature. The address led me to this rundown trailer park on the outskirts of town, the kind where half the mailboxes are hanging by a thread and dogs bark at you from behind chain-link fences. I found the right trailer, number 47, and it looked like it hadn't been painted in 20 years. The metal steps leading to the front door were rusted and wobbly, and I could hear some old country music playing faintly from inside. I knocked twice, heard shuffling footsteps, and then this older woman opened the door. She was probably in her 70s, thin as a rail, with grey hair pulled back in a messy bun. What struck me immediately was how she looked at that package, like she'd been waiting for it her whole life. Her eyes lit up in this weird way that made my skin crawl a little, but I just figured she was excited about whatever she'd ordered. She signed for it on my little device, but when I started to turn away, she grabbed my arm with these bony fingers that were surprisingly strong. "Honey, I hate to ask, but could you help me get this inside? My back ain't what it used to be, and this thing weighs a ton. Now, technically, we're not supposed to go inside people's homes, but I've bent that rule plenty of times for elderly folks who genuinely need help." She seemed harmless enough, just a frail old lady who couldn't handle a heavy box. So I said sure, picked up the package, and followed her through the front door. The smell hit me immediately, that musty, closed-up smell mixed with something else I couldn't quite place, something sour and unpleasant. The inside of the trailer was dark, even though it was only about 2 in the afternoon. Heavy curtains blocked out most of the sunlight, and the only light came from an old lamp in the corner that barely worked. The place was cluttered with newspapers, old magazines, and random junk piled everywhere. I could barely see where I was walking, and I had to step carefully around boxes and bags scattered on the floor. She led me through the narrow hallway, past a tiny kitchen that looked like it hasn't been cleaned in months, toward what I assumed was a back bedroom. "Just put it right in here, sugar," she said, pointing to a doorway at the end of the hall. The floorboards creaked under my feet with every step, and I started feeling this weird sense of unease creeping up my spine. Maybe it was just the darkness or the smell, but something felt off about the whole situation. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid, that I'd drop off the package and get out of there in 30 seconds. When we got to the back room, it was even darker than the rest of the trailer. No windows, just one bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling that she didn't bother to turn on. I could barely make out the shapes of furniture, what looked like an old dresser, maybe a bed pushed against the far wall. "Right there by the dresser is perfect," she said, and her voice sounded different now, more eager somehow. I bent down to set the heavy box where she pointed, and that's when I heard it, the faintest sound of someone breathing that wasn't coming from me or the old woman. My blood went cold instantly. I froze there, crouched down with the package, straining my ears to make sure I wasn't imagining things. There it was again, a soft, deliberate breath coming from somewhere in the darkness. I slowly turned my head toward the sound, and my eyes had adjusted just enough to make out the outline of a closet door that was cracked open about 6 inches, and I swear, on my mother's grave, there was definitely someone standing inside that closet, watching us. My heart started pounding so hard, I thought it might burst out of my chest. I could see just the faintest outline of a person's silhouette behind that closet door, someone tall, completely still, just standing there in the darkness watching everything unfold. The old woman was still talking, saying something about how grateful she was for my help, but her voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. All I could focus on was that figure in the closet, and the fact that whoever it was had been hiding there the entire time, listening to our conversation, waiting for something. My hands started shaking as I tried to process what I was seeing. This wasn't some coat or pile of clothes playing tricks on my eyes. This was definitely a person, and they were positioned in a way that gave them a perfect view of the room. I felt like I was going to throw up. Every instinct in my body started screaming at me to get out of there immediately, but I was frozen in place, crouched down with this stupid heavy package, trying not to make any sudden movements. I somehow managed to stand up slowly, keeping my eyes on that closet door, and started backing toward the hallway. "You know what, ma'am? I actually need to get going," I said, trying to keep my voice steady even though it felt like my throat was closing up. But she stepped between me and the doorway, and suddenly her whole demeanor changed. The sweet, helpless old lady act disappeared completely. "Oh no, honey, you can't leave yet," she said, and there was something in her tone that made my skin crawl. "You haven't even stayed for some sweet tea, I insist." She moved closer to me, and I noticed her eyes looked different now. Sharper, more focused, like she was calculating something. I could still sense that person in the closet, probably listening to every word, and I realized this whole thing had been planned. The heavy package, the request for help, leading me to this dark back room. None of it was a coincidence. I felt trapped like an animal, and panic started rising in my chest like a tidal wave. "Thanks, but I really have to go," I said, trying to push past her toward the hallway, but she grabbed my arm again with those bony fingers, this time digging her nails into my skin. "I said you're not leaving yet," she hissed, and her voice had completely transformed into something cold and threatening. That's when I heard movement from the closet, a soft shuffling sound like someone shifting their weight or taking a step forward. I didn't even look back to see if the closet door was opening wider. Pure adrenaline kicked in, and I shoved past the old woman, harder than I probably should have, sending her stumbling backward into the dresser. She started yelling at me, calling me names I won't repeat, but I was already halfway down that narrow hallway, knocking over boxes and bags in my desperate rush to get to the front door. My heart was beating so fast, I thought I might have a heart attack right there in her trailer. Behind me, I could hear her screaming about how rude I was, how I was going to pay for this, but underneath her voice, I swear I heard footsteps following me down the hall. I burst through that front door like the trailer was on fire, not caring that I probably looked like a complete lunatic to anyone who might be watching. The afternoon sunlight hit my face, and I've never been so grateful to feel fresh air in my lungs. I practically fell down those rusted metal steps in my rush to get to my truck, fumbling with my keys like my hands belonged to someone else. The old woman appeared in the doorway behind me, still screaming at the top of her lungs about how I was a terrible person, how she was going to call my supervisor and get me fired. But what really freaked me out was that I could see someone else moving around inside the trailer now, a dark figure passing by one of the windows, definitely not her. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition, and the whole time I kept expecting someone to come running out of that trailer after me. The woman was still yelling from her doorway, but I couldn't even process what she was saying anymore. All I wanted was to get as far away from that place as possible. I peeled out of that trailer park like a bat out of hell, gravel flying everywhere, not caring if I looked like a maniac. My whole body was trembling, and I had to pull over about a mile down the road because I thought I was going to be sick. I sat there in my truck for probably 10 minutes, just trying to catch my breath and figure out what the hell had just happened. The logical part of my brain kept trying to convince me that maybe I'd imagined the whole thing, that it was just shadows playing tricks on me in that dark room. But I know what I saw. And I know what I felt in that moment. There was definitely someone hiding in that closet, watching us the entire time, and that old woman knew exactly who it was. The way she tried to block me from leaving, the way her whole personality changed when I tried to go, none of that was normal behavior. I kept replaying every detail in my head, trying to make sense of it, but it just made me feel more scared and confused. When I finally made it back to the depot that afternoon, I was still a wreck. My supervisor, Mike, took one look at me and asked if I was okay because apparently I looked like I'd seen a ghost. I wanted to tell him what happened, but how do you explain something like that without sounding completely crazy? "Hey, Mike, I think some old lady and her friend were trying to trap me in their trailer for God knows what reason." It sounds insane even typing it out now, so I just told him I wasn't feeling well and asked if I could call it a day early. He let me go without any questions, probably because I'd never asked to leave early in all my years working there. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that silhouette in the closet and heard the old woman's voice changing from sweet to threatening in a matter of seconds. I kept thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't noticed the person hiding there, or if I'd been too polite to push past her when she tried to stop me from leaving. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about that package. What was in it that was so important? Why did it weigh 60 pounds? And why had it been sitting in our depot for 3 days before I delivered it? I started wondering if maybe I should report what happened to the police. But again, what would I even say? That an old lady asked me to help her with a package and someone was hiding in her closet? It's not like they committed a crime that I could prove. But the more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that I'd walked into some kind of setup. Maybe they were planning to rob me, or worse. The way she insisted I come inside, the way she led me to that specific dark room, the way that person was positioned perfectly to watch everything, none of it felt random. I even looked up the address online to see if I could find any information about the residence, but nothing came up except property records showing the trailer had been sold a few years ago. I started driving different routes to avoid that area completely, even though it added extra time to my deliveries. About a week later, I was talking to another driver, Jamie, who's been working this area longer than me, and I casually mentioned the trailer park where I'd had a weird delivery. His face immediately got serious, and he asked me which trailer specifically. When I told him number 47, he got this look that made my stomach drop. "Dude, you need to stay away from that place," he said. "I've heard some really strange stories about that woman from other drivers. Packages that get delivered there and then show up again on our delivery list a few days later like they never got delivered in the first place. And more than one driver has mentioned feeling like something was off about that whole situation." He wouldn't give me more details, just kept saying I should trust my instincts and never go back there alone. Hearing that from Jamie, who's usually pretty skeptical about everything, made me realize I probably wasn't imagining things. Whatever was going on in that trailer, I wasn't the first person to notice it. A couple weeks passed, and I thought I was finally starting to put the whole thing behind me. Then I got another delivery notice for that same address, Trailer 47. My heart sank when I saw it on my list, and I immediately went to Mike to ask if someone else could handle it. I made up some excuse about having trouble finding the place last time, but he just shrugged and said it was my route, my responsibility. This time, though, I wasn't taking any chances. I brought my phone with me, made sure it was fully charged, and even told my girlfriend Sarah exactly where I was going and what time I expected to be back. When I pulled up to the trailer park, everything looked exactly the same. The same rusted mailboxes, the same barking dogs, the same rundown trailers. But when I got to number 47, something was different. The trailer was completely dark, no music playing, no signs of life at all. I knocked on the door several times, waited about 5 minutes, then left one of those attempted delivery notices and got out of there as fast as I could. Part of me was relieved, but another part of me was even more creeped out by how empty and silent the place seemed. That was 3 months ago, and I still think about what happened in that trailer almost every day. I've driven past that trailer park a few times since then, and number 47 always looks abandoned now. Windows dark, no car in the driveway, weeds growing up around the step. Sometimes I wonder if they moved away right after our encounter, like maybe they realized their plan, whatever it was, had been discovered. Or maybe they're still there, just waiting for the next unsuspecting delivery driver to show up with a heavy package that needs to be carried to the back room. I've never told anyone the full story except for Sarah, and even she thinks I might have been letting my imagination run wild. But I know what I saw, and I know what I felt in that moment when I realized someone was watching us from that closet. The whole thing still gives me chills, and I probably check my rearview mirror twice as much as I used to. I guess I'll never know what they were really planning, or who that person in the closet was, or what was actually in that 60-pound package. Maybe that's for the best. Some things are better left unknown, and I'm just grateful I trusted my instincts and got out of there when I did.